Amsterdam and not Bangkok. Michael, good morning.
Morning. Nice
How
to
are
see
you,
I'm
other
very
than
well.
being really, really cold?
It's definitely chilly, but other than that, it keeps us awake, that's for sure. Yes.
Okay, so we're going to try and warm up the conversation then.
Sounds
okay.
good.
So I was having breakfast at a very quiet corner, and then suddenly I see this tall gentleman come in, and I go, oh, that's Michael having breakfast here. So reading the newspapers this morning was really interesting, right? So one of the headlines was Facebook being called a monster in Europe. Zuckerberg, the golden boy, fall from grace, about data privacy. So I happened to be in Amsterdam last week, and I heard Maud Bailey, who's your chief digital officer, talk about this. And what she said was that Accor has a chief data privacy officer as well. You've been working on it for a year.
Yes.
And what she said was she believes that data could become a differentiator in how people choose brands, i.e. consumers will choose companies that respect their privacy and protect their data.
Yep.
Do you think that's wishful thinking?
No, look, I think it's actually reality, because one of the buzzwords today is big data, right? And you heard it, I think Patrick spoke about it earlier. We one of the things we're after is increasing the size of our loyalty program, working with our partner in China, Wazoo, and so it's partly being respectful, but it's also how do you use it? Because that's the challenge. Like Wazoo has 100 million members in China. We have over 40 million members in the rest of the world. And so you want not just to be respectful, but you want to be relevant. Because bombarding people with offers or information they're not interested in doesn't achieve anything. So what you need to be relevant, targeted, informative.
So you think this will actually, get companies not only to be respectful of their privacy, but also to use their data in a more relevant and selected manner?
Actually, from my perspective, this won't make us do it. That's what we need to do irrespective.
Right, but this will force you to do it,
It forces
right?
you to, but again, if we were already going down that path, because that's what's going to make us successful.
Okay, but do you really think that consumers will choose brands that respect their data? Because there's a, as I think in the earlier panel, there's talk that, young people younger than both of us, like they don't care.
No, but they still care about getting a relevant offer, relevant information. So they go hand in hand. If you're relevant and it's informative, then it's respectful. And so one follows the other. So in reality, it's a law that's policing the people that aren't doing their job well.
Okay.
If you're doing your job well, then yes, of course, there's going to be.
So it's going to sort out the men from the boys or the women from the girls, right? But so my worry, Michael, is that something as big as this, and we talked about all the companies that are sending us all this privacy and all that. It's only really the big companies that can afford these resources to look after this section, right? What's going to happen to the small guys, the smaller hotel companies, the startups who cannot afford these resources to look at that? Do you think that's going to mean that the world is going to be like bigger, going to just get bigger?
Well, I mean, I think that's going to happen irrespective of this. That's a trend. But I'm also a believer there is actually always space for smaller companies, right? In that people want choice, right? And we can come back to it. Part of what we're about is delivering choice at scale. But for whether you use the term niche operators, smaller operators, targeted operators, boutique operators, people want that. So I believe there's always an opportunity for startup and new ideas, which is great. That's what makes the world interesting.
Okay, so now let's talk about another world issue, right? There was another headline in Wall Street Journal talking about over-tourism. So I was in Amsterdam, and there was a lot of talk about that too, where local people are unhappy about the over-tourism, Airbnb coming in and private apartments being taken over and sort of cities losing their character. So Venice was mentioned, New Zealand was mentioned. We see a lot of examples in Asia. So personally, I feel like it's not fair to just single out Airbnb, right? Because you hotels, I mean, like just now in the first panel, it's like people are talking about millions of rooms here and all that. So you are also responsible for it.
Because to me, they're two different issues. What private rental in urban environments is more about community than over tourism. right? And that's a challenge. I mean, I live in an apartment. You probably do as well, living in Singapore, and you want to have a community where you live, and private rental can intrude on that. That's a different issue. Over-tourism is something that we've faced for decades, right? I mean, and particularly, because that's why for me, urban is different than whether there's beaches or historic, like you take Siem Reap and Angkor Wat. First time I went there was a couple decades ago, and you go now, you practically have to queue up, and that's a challenge, and it always will be, right? And it's always been something that I mean, here in Thailand, go to some of the beaches.
What's the answer?
The answer is one, you have to build infrastructure, right? So that because you need to protect the environment, right? But you're not going to hold back travel. Because to turn it on the other side, we in this industry, we're actually, the one thing we're very fortunate about, and particularly in this part of the world, we're in a growth industry, right? And how we respond to that growth, I'd rather have that problem than in an industry that there's no growth and you're faced with cutting costs or just and having a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
So we're in a growth industry. That's going to continue.
So it's a good problem to have.
It's a good problem to have, and part of it is people also will vote with their feet, right? In that if something becomes too overcrowded, it also becomes unpleasant, and that's where tourism, that's where dispersion happens.
Okay.
Right.
So in Amsterdam too, there was a talk about the tension between, because Google just got fined $2.6 billion, I think, in Europe for the antitrust, right? Anti-privacy, antitrust. And so there was a lot of talk about globalization versus global localization, and there's this increased tension, right? And there was an argument that said that local companies, that consumers should support local companies because local companies tend to be more accountable to their local communities versus global companies that kind of operate hence, arm's length and all that, and don't care too much about it. What do you think of that argument?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's an element of truth to that, but I know that certainly our strategy in Asia Pacific has always been to, have a global company that acts locally, and we've invested, like we have offices in Auckland, Sydney, Jakarta, Bangkok, Singapore, Delhi, Shanghai, Tokyo, Seoul, right? And they're all operated by people from those countries, right? And we want our hotels to be relevant in the local markets. We want our teams to be local. We create employment, and then we create career opportunities either within a country or internationally if they want. But that's about each company, how they behave and how responsible they are in the local community. Yeah. And then by the same token, we also have significant CSR programs that, besides sustainability, but also putting back into the community because that makes you part of the community. I mean, that's not just about being nice. That's good business.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that hotel companies actually have an advantage in that because, as you say, you're very much part of the local community. So now let's talk to AccorHotels. I mean, Patrick covered a lot of.
Did a very good job as well.
Yeah, I mean.
I
got all the numbers already. So lots of things going on. One, you're separating the real estate business, right?
Yep.
And then 2 acquisitions, Fairmont, Mantra, Movenpick. 3 in less than 24 months.
A lot more than that, but that's okay.
Oh, a lot more. Okay.
Those are the bigger ones. Yeah.
Okay. So how do all these pieces fit into like the big picture that you're trying to build?
Yeah. Well, again, we're responding to the market, right? And some of it was covered on the panel, and it was interesting to hear some of the thoughts that were being shared. But for me, it's again going back to increasingly guests, consumers, travelers, they want individuality, they want choice. But so what we're doing is providing that, right, on a very large scale. And that choice is both whether it's brand, whether it's segment, whether it's services that go beyond the hotels, right? It's doing all of those things, right? Because then also as a public company, and I think all that were represented up here, we're all public companies. And one of the challenges of a public company is you have to grow.
Right.
There's no alternative. As a private company, you can have a very good year this year or a couple years and decide, I'm going to sit tight. And I'm just going to, and I don't need to grow exponentially because I'm still profitable and that's okay. As a public company, you have to grow every year.
Yeah, so you have that sort of, that pressure to, as you say, you're responding to the market because consumers want choice and they want the diversity of products, but at the same time, you're actually responding to stakeholders and
Both,
shareholders,
exactly.
right? Both. So there's a tension between the two, right? So clearly, I mean, the quest is about scale, you say, right? I mean, it's about scale.
Well, no, it's about growth. Scale happens to be part of the growth.
Okay, so can we show the slide that I prepared?
You didn't tell me about a slide, Sue.
Yeah, well, I put together, can we have that slide, just that one slide? And there are those that say that there's only room for 3 giants. So this was a set of data that put together at STR Global saying, these are the top 5 hotel companies. And Airbnb, 4 million listings, is actually larger than the top 5 combined, right? Mm-hmm. So where does Accor sit in now after Movenpick?
Because actually,
go into that.
Metro and Movenpick will be, both of those combined will be about another 50,000 rooms, so it'll be about 580. So still sitting where we are now.
So where do you want to be? Do you want to be above Marriott or between Marriott and Hilton, and where, by when?
Well, sure, of course we want to be above Marriott, but
Marriott, huh?
But that sits in Sebastian's basket, not mine. Look, and again, while as I said, growth as a public company is a necessity, but you can't have growth for growth's sake. Right? You need to be smart about the acquisitions that you have. You have to have a clear strategy about where you want to head. As I think it's well known, Accor's growth isn't solely in terms of in the hotel space. We also are in what we refer to as the augmented hospitality, going into other areas to make sure that we're continuing to grow, taking some bets, whether it's in digital, whether it's in private rental, whether it's in concierge services, whether it's in food and beverage, and in a whole variety of different businesses that we knit together to fuel our growth.
Okay, so I think in the earlier panel too, Dilip from Minor Hotels talked about this integration and how chopping staff is just one of the things that you have to do, and integration is not a really, really good way, right? So I mean, you've had a few integrations to go through.
I certainly have, yes.
Clearly chopped a few people.
Look, that's part of mergers and acquisitions, and to think otherwise, personally, I think is a little bit naive. I mean, in fact, the Mantra acquisition we close a week from today, and Mantra is a public company listed on the Australian Stock Exchange. Well, as of next Thursday, it's not listed. There's about $5 million in cost purely in being a public company. That's the easiest low-hanging fruit, right? And then it's about, there are back office functions that do become redundant. So an integration, and I have been through a few. This will be my third major one, and I've learned a bit in doing it. And you start off, but you need to win. We refer win the hearts and minds, and that's the hearts and minds of the people of the company that you're acquiring, as well as the hearts and minds of the guests that are staying in those hotels and the owners that own those hotels. So that's we start with that as a premise, and how do we achieve that? And then part of an acquisition, whilst you are going to be saving costs, and that's why synergies is a very fancy word for some things that it can be difficult to do, but you also are acquiring new talent, right? And each acquisition is a little bit different. Like for us, particularly Fairmont Raffles, we wanted people that had an expertise in luxury.
Which was the toughest integration ever for you personally?
Well, that one was for me personally, because I'd led that integration. It was global. It was in Toronto. I was living in Singapore. We were based in Paris. We were two very different companies. So that one was pretty challenging, definitely. In the sort of, I'd say, a third of the way through the integration for Mantra. And again, each one's very different because they have a very different business model. The majority of their businesses is what's referred to as management letting rights, very specific to Australia and New Zealand type of business. We have a lot of skill going back to acquiring a local company. And that skill set's part of what we're acquiring. Right? When we acquired Mirvac about 6 years ago, we started down that path. If we hadn't done that, we wouldn't have had the confidence to acquire Mantra. But Mantra's really good at that.
Okay, so it gets easier with each integration.
Yeah, but because you need to identify part of the USPs that you're acquiring. And then, so yes, you're going to be cutting costs, but you need to really protect, whether it's brand, whether it's human capital, whether it's geography. You set out with a strategy. It's not just about growth. It shouldn't be just about growth when you acquire something. Okay. It's how does it fit? Why are you acquiring it?
Okay, so now let's move on to, we talked about Airbnb 4 million listings, right? The area of alternative accommodation. Yep. Europe, it's a hot topic. Booking.com recently announced a milestone of 5 million reported listings, so they are bigger than Airbnb now. You've also made moves in this alternative accommodation, right? So what else can hotel brands do to respond other than just kind of buying?
Yeah, look, to me, the most important thing as hotels is the world's moving to experiential travel. Yeah, the latest one is transformational, right? That's the next level beyond experience.
I thought it was augmented hospitality.
No, that's something that sits alongside. Transformational is the experience when you're traveling.
Yeah,
right?
okay.
And people, and fortunately, again, people love to travel, right? And one of the I'll never forget. I was actually interviewing Ian Thorpe. We sponsored the Australian swim team back when he was a superstar. And ironically, he was the one. Right, I asked him, how does he determine a great hotel? And he says, if I'm staying in a great hotel, I want to keep traveling. And if I'm staying in a hotel I don't like, I feel like it's time to go home. Our drive is to want people to keep traveling, and that's the advantage that we as hoteliers have, is to provide experience. And that's we all talk about people as an industry, and we are in it. We have two things going for us. We have a number of things going for us in the industry. It's a growth industry. It is a people industry. So when we grow, we create opportunity, we create jobs. A lot of other industries don't do that. Having great people in our hotels is what makes the difference. And and spending the time developing our teams to deliver people, whether you call it moments, experiences, you can put all sorts of fancy words around it, but making sure people really have a great travel experience, that's our competitive advantage to private rental.
What's the greatest travel experience you've had? What's the greatest experiential travel that you've had?
Actually,
and who facilitated it?
It was relatively, again, it's kind of, I always hate the greatest, the best, but one of the most recent really good ones I had I was in Laos. And we went, it was an elephant conservation. So, because I remember...
Laos?
Laos,
okay.
out near La Provence.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
And as opposed to, down the road, if you want to ride an elephant, you can. But if you've ever done that, it's kind of sad the way the elephants get treated.
Well, riding elephants is not a really good thing to do, apparently,
exactly,
these days, right? Yeah.
Yep. So this is about rehabilitating elephants. So either they were doing logging before, or they had been doing rides. And so you fed the elephants, you washed the elephants, you went on a trek with the elephants. It was awesome, right? Because it was authentic. It was in the bush, or in the mountains, and you're walking there with these huge elephants. And
maybe Accor should buy all these elephant camps around the world.
Probably not.
To provide an experience.
That would be augmented hospitality, but I'm not sure it's scalable. But it was very special.
Okay,
right? It was a great experience.
Okay, now let's talk about leadership, right? Because you've been running.
There's a book out there that says it's lonely. So
Loneliness. Is it lonely?
I can be, yes, yeah, can be, definitely, occasionally.
And what do you do to resolve that loneliness? You read?
Yeah, no, but what you do, you definitely read, but that's not about loneliness. The way around, obviously you have to, having a very wonderful wife is probably the best way not to be lonely, or a partner, but...
you think she'd say the same thing?
What about me being wonderful? Possibly, I hope so. But it's having a team that you can share challenges with. And I was, for me, what's most important is I never want someone in my team to come to me and say, I have a problem. It's we have a problem, right? And I never say to someone, you have a problem. It's like, we got to sort this out.
Okay.
And that's, ultimately the buck stops with you as a leader, but having a team that you enjoy working with, that you share challenges with, that's to me the biggest mitigating
Actually,
factor.
talking about loneliness, that reminds me of a great talk that I heard, the late Anita Roddick. And she said, anything that takes away loneliness is going to be a great business. And I would think that hospitality actually does take away that loneliness.
No question.
Right. So now let's talk about creative destruction, from loneliness to creative destruction, right? And we talk about how big companies can avoid creative destruction, just get too big. So there was a blog by Glenn Fogel, who's the CEO of Booking Holdings, and he said that he draws inspiration from this theory, which is a U.S. Air Force strategist, right? His name is Colonel John Boyd. And he has this OODA loop theory. And the theory is, 1, observe the situation. 2, orient, meaning process and understand what is being observed. 3, decide on the course of action. And 4, act fast. Right? So where do you draw inspiration from?
Inspiration, it's from a whole variety of sources, right? And it's looking at other industries, for one, because I've been in this industry for a long time, and we can get a little bit insular. The world is changing. It only changes faster, right? I suppose if I had to say at the moment, the one place I get the most inspiration from is probably China, because the speed of change in China, the world is, China is the most different place in the world right now. And I'm fortunate I go there pretty much every month, and trying to stay on top of that, I think keeps me relevant.
So the inspiration is from just the speed and how they're innovating.
Innovating and changing and adapting and not seeming to be affected by that.
Right. So then let's talk about China then, since your partnership with China Lodging, right? And you went into a partnership.
Yes.
So why a partnership and versus going it alone? What are the benefits of that partnership? And it's been like how many years on since that partnership?
Almost 3. Yeah.
3
2
years.
and a half.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh look, it was a difficult decision. We had gone into China, and I suppose it actually wasn't a difficult decision in hindsight. We started Ibis Hotels. We built it and opened. We started in 2000. We opened our first one in 2004. See how it would go. Went well. Opened 2 more in 2006, and then we were up to 100 hotels, and Wazoo only started about a year or 2 after us. And by the time we got to 100, they were well past 1,000. And they were one of 3 companies that were doing it. And so it was obvious that, because particularly in the economy sector, it is about volume. And so we had lost that race in China. And we looked at a few different companies, and particularly spent a lot of time with Chairman Jiqi, who was he was a founder of Ctrip and Home Inn, and then Wazoo. He's an extraordinary guy. And so we sold our economy business, the real estate that we had developed, and the master franchise rights for the Ibis and Mercure brands in China. And it was all about accelerating our growth in the country. And it's worked out extraordinarily well for us.
So it was kind of recognizing, a bit like, what Expedia did with Elong too, and they had to kind of give up as well, because you find that the local guys are going to do it faster, right?
We sold our business that part of our business for $193 million, in exchange for an 11% stake in the company, which is worth close to $1.2 billion now. So I think it was a good deal.
Fantastic. Okay. So you've also done a partnership with Ctrip again, so why that partnership, and, does it not surrender more power to OTAs? Like Ctrip is one of the largest, fastest growing OTAs controlling distribution worldwide. Like 70% share in Asia. Why are you having this partnership with Ctrip?
Yeah, for a variety of reasons. And, we use the term that OTAs are our partners, and they are, right? In that, travel agents have been around.
How much do you pay in commission to OTAs a year?
Dollar amount, because don't forget, it comes from each individual hotel, so it's not Accor that's writing the check, but literally it's tens of millions of dollars, right? But we've paid travel agents and wholesalers for years, right? So it's not like our business has always been intermediated, right? And so the challenge is controlling the cost of that intermediation, right? Because you're never going to get all of your business going direct to your hotel. It's never happened in our history. Now, when the internet came along 20 years ago, we thought, aha, this is going to be our chance to disintermediate. Yeah. Well,
it didn't.
Shame on us.
It didn't
happen, right? So you need to work with the new reality, right? Now, so Ctrip, and again, the China market being quite specific, and it's not. China is a very specific place, not just in our industry, in every industry, right? So that's why we decided specifically for China that we wanted to take a bet there, and part of it's about distribution. Part of it's also about technology, because all of the technology in China is bespoke to China, right? And so needing to continue to develop our technology in China, we're using both of our partners to help us, both Wazoo, who's also very good at technology, and C-Trip. So that was also a very big part of the strategy.
So it's really picking the right partner that can just okay, so we have 5 minutes, and I want to really cover a couple of big issues, right? One,
I thought we had. Yeah, a couple others. Yeah.
C-Trip, right? Technology partners. One lesson that you learn from tech companies.
Speed, definitely.
All right.
Yep.
2, I want to talk about gender diversity, right? Because that's a lot of attention lately, new accountability for companies to have more diversity, ethnic and gender, right? So a McKinsey study reports that, why there were 3 main barriers to women moving into senior roles. One was the anytime, anywhere performance. And
But
then 2,
that one applies to everybody.
yeah, okay,
Right.
that's fair. Yeah.
Yep.
2 was the double burden of women holding down jobs while looking after families, and then 3, the absence of role models,
Yep.
female role models, right? So briefly, what is Accor doing to influence those 3 barriers?
Well,
What are you
the
doing?
first is, that's not just, as I said, it's not just female. It's, we all now work pretty much 24/7. That's the new paradigm. The last one is the key, right? The role models, because and that's about volume. Right, and I was interested. I was listening to Alan Joyce, who's the CEO of Qantas recently. 97% of pilots are male, right? So they have target for gender diversity, but obviously it takes a long time to train a pilot, and you don't want anyone taking the shortcut there. So to do that now, what they're doing is 50% of their what they call cadets are female,
Okay.
and it's going to take time because you need the volume. And so likewise, same with us, right? We can't all of a sudden decide tomorrow that, well, we have targets to increase our female general managers, but we actually need time and we need volume in terms of the people that we're training to get there. And
Right.
so that's the objective.
Okay, so the first thing, though, is to remove that unconscious bias, right? You
Correct.
would agree that there is an unconscious bias.
I actually think no, I wouldn't say, we're past that. One of our challenges, particularly in Asia, is at the end of the day, every general manager has to be approved by an individual owner. So that's the bias that we still have to overcome as well.
Okay. I think that in Africa, there's an airline that actually has all female pilots,
I'd be surprised. but,
Okay, so we have 3 minutes, and I'm just going to go rapid fire, 1-word answer, okay? Name one hotel company and one thing it does better than yours.
Banyan tree, spas.
Okay. Most exciting innovation that you're seeing in hospitality right now.
Big data.
Okay. Blockchain.
Fascinating.
Okay. The one department in a hotel that needs the biggest overhaul.
Food and beverage.
Okay. The quality I like to improve most about myself.
Jet lag.
That's not a quality.
I'd like to get rid of it anyway.
Okay. Market that excited me the most in my time in Asia.
China.
Untapped opportunity.
Still China.
Really?
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Hotelier who's inspired me the most.
Henry Rose.
Okay. The book that changed my life.
Book that changed my life. Probably 7 Habits, a long time ago.
7 Habits,
Yep.
okay. And the thing that's keeping me most excited about the future.
Change.
Change.
Always change.
Okay, and if I had to, I know you're big into sports, right?
Yes.
Right. So if you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you be doing?
Oh, geez. Possibly. That's one of the things I've going back into youth administration of sport, because I do love sport, and I also believe that sport does help develop people, and particularly at the grassroots level.
Okay, and the one thing that you're doing to, what do you tell your kids when they want to join hospitality?
They don't. What I tell my kids is what's most important is to find something that they love, because you're going to spend a lot of time doing it, and if you don't have a passion for it, you won't be successful.
All right. Okay, on that note, thank you very much,
Thank
Michael.
you.
Thank you. Please join me in thanking Michael.